Professor Alan Moore shuffled a stack of student papers on his cluttered desk as the afternoon light filtered through his office window. His small apartment, which doubled as an academic sanctuary, was filled with artifacts from different worlds and cultures, books spilling out from their shelves onto the floor, posters of distant planets adorning the walls, and a globe that spun slowly in the corner. The door to his modest living space opened abruptly, revealing a figure he hadn't expected. The Iraqi woman who stepped inside was unlike any Alan had ever encountered on screen or during one of the few rare visits to their home planet for academic research. She stood tall at 5 feet 10 inches, her emerald scales shimmering under the light that danced off them like liquid jade. Her intelligent amber eyes scanned his room with a curious glint before settling on him. Alan's heart skipped a beat as he tried to place who she was. The woman's simple dress did little to catch attention, jewels or extravagant designs like those worn by her more recognized sisters. She held a printed copy of one of his academic papers, and the realization hit him with an overwhelming wave of dread. This must be Princess Karavith. Professor Moore, she began in a voice that was both commanding and surprisingly gentle for someone of such apparent stature. You wrote that I am the most fascinating royal in the Tireki court. Alan's face flushed as he fumbled through his papers. He wasn't ready to have this conversation, far from it. And you said my eyes show intelligence that outshines any crown, she continued, each word punctuated with a precision that left Alan feeling exposed and uncomfortably aware of the significance behind her words. You wrote that I am beautiful. He went pale as he realized what was unfolding. Princess Karavith? His voice quavered with nervousness mixed with astonishment. This couldn't be happening. How could his paper have reached such a high-profile figure? The princess stepped closer, her movements fluid and elegant despite the formal nature of her visit. She placed the printed copy on his desk carefully before looking up at him again. Was it? She asked softly, tilting her head slightly as if gauging his reaction to her direct question. Alan swallowed hard, unsure how to respond without sounding defensive or dismissive. His mind raced back through all the arguments and data he had meticulously compiled for that paper. It was an academic analysis intended to highlight overlooked aspects of Tireki culture, particularly focusing on Princess Karavith due to his personal observation about her unique place within it. But this wasn't an academic setting anymore. It was reality crashing down around him. He felt the weight of every sentence he had written pressing against his throat now that she stood there before him, demanding answers in a way that made everything feel suddenly far more real than ever could have imagined when locked away with only books for company. I meant it as an academic observation. Alan tried again, attempting to find some middle ground between the formal respect owed her rank and his genuine intention behind those words. To point out perspectives often missed in mainstream discussions about Tireki society, Princess Karavith nodded slowly, but didn't move away from him or lower her gaze. Questions then, she declared firmly, cutting off any further excuses he might have planned to offer. She took a seat across the small desk that separated them, not just physically, but metaphorically too, as Alan found himself on more precarious ground than ever before. Her tone shifted slightly when she spoke next. Professor Moore, you wrote of my culture in ways it has never been written about before. And we discuss these matters further. There are things I wish to understand better. The words hung between them like a challenge and an invitation simultaneously. Alan felt his heart hammering against his chest as he looked into those amber eyes, reflecting the complexity of emotions now facing him head-on. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself for whatever lay ahead. Of course, Princess Karaveth, we can certainly talk more. With that admission, she sat down fully at a chair pulled up near where he stood. The sudden shift in dynamics left Alan feeling both humbled and oddly excited about the unexpected turn their meeting was taking. The room felt smaller somehow now that it contained this piece of history unfolding right before his eyes, and yet everything around them seemed to dissolve away into irrelevance as they delved deeper into what brought her here today. The cluttered desk, globe spinning silently in its corner, books lining shelves all faded from relevance compared to the moment playing out between Professor and royalty. As Alan prepared himself for whatever came next, there was no denying that everything had changed with just this one visit, and how could it not be when he looked into those eyes reflecting back his own words like a mirror? She sat down. I have questions, Professor. And so did he, more than ever before, as the initial shock began to give way to anticipation of what new insights might emerge from their conversation. A&D Princess Karaveth stepped into Alan's office, her emerald scales glinting softly under the light of a nearby lamp. The room was cluttered but welcoming, a testament to years spent collecting knowledge and artifacts from various cultures across galaxies. Books lined every available shelf, maps hung on walls like colorful tapestries of forgotten worlds. Alan stood by his desk, hands nervously rubbing together as he greeted her with formal politeness tinged with genuine curiosity. Princess Karaveth, he said warmly yet respectfully, bowing slightly despite the casual setting. Karaveth nodded back, without speaking for a moment before addressing him directly. Professor Moore, she began hesitantly, but firmly, looking into his eyes, as though searching for some truth buried there. She had arrived expecting an explanation, perhaps even confrontation. Yet here he was, standing quietly with no outward sign of arrogance or defensiveness. I've read your work. Kira's voice cut through the air like a sharp edge. Specifically, her gaze hardened slightly as she paused for effect, leaning against his desk now to emphasize her presence and claim dominance over this space momentarily stolen from academia's normal flow. Your paper praising my people's culture in me specifically. Alan felt himself go rigid at these words, his heart hammering in chest louder than ever before. I meant it as an academic observation. He tried again, searching for some way to deflect while still maintaining respect and honesty, to highlight perspectives often missed by the mainstream discussion of Trekkie society, to point out certain cultural blind spots. Kira's eyes narrowed slightly at his words. She was clearly assessing him now for any hint of insincerity or pretense beneath this carefully constructed facade. You wrote me beautiful, Kira continued after a tense pause, beautiful in ways my people never see. You called the third princess fascinating. Did you mean it? The question hung heavy between them, each syllable weighing on Alan's conscience as he recalled every sentence, every detail of his paper, written with scholarly detachment yet infused secretly by genuine admiration. Yes, Alan admitted finally, after swallowing hard against a sudden knot in throat. Yes, I did. Kira listened intently to this confirmation before replying quietly, no one has ever called me brilliant. Her tone was more reflective than accusatory now. Perhaps she understood the distinction between personal feelings and academic truths. Alan felt compelled by her words to clarify further, to explain not just what he had written, but why. He stepped closer, his hands outstretched slightly, as if offering a bridge of understanding rather than defending himself against criticism. You are, Alan said gently, almost reverently. Your writings, Your policies show insight and creativity far beyond the usual decorum expected from royalty." His voice dropped to nearly a whisper, "And yet, here you stand in my office like no one has ever seen what's truly there." Kira's expression softened briefly upon hearing this praise. She tilted her head thoughtfully while considering his words. The room seemed to grow quieter around them as they engaged deeply with each other, forgetting all else save their exchange. "Your sisters are decorative," Alan said, suddenly breaking the silence again, "while you're transformative." His voice held both awe and quiet conviction that only grew stronger as he spoke. "There's a difference." Kira's eyes widened in surprise at this statement. It wasn't what she had expected to hear. For once she didn't know how to respond immediately. Alan continued softly but firmly. "Decorative isn't always bad," he offered gently. "But transformative, that changes worlds and hearts." She looked back up at him, then really saw the man standing before her, not just a scholar studying alien cultures from afar through books or lectures, but someone who genuinely understood what she had long felt was lost within Trekkie society itself. Kira's eyes flickered between Alan and the desk again, perhaps seeking some kind of confirmation that this moment wasn't simply an illusion. Then finally, she seemed to find something solid enough in his sincere gaze, a mirror reflecting back her own value and worth more clearly than anything else ever had before. "You wrote what I have always thought but never said," Kira murmured softly, as realization dawned on her face, her eyes suddenly lighting up with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "You saw me truly?" Alan could only nod in response, feeling the weight of this acknowledgment settle between them like an unspoken bond forged through shared understanding. The room felt smaller somehow now that it contained this piece of history unfolding right before their eyes, and yet everything around them seemed to dissolve away into irrelevance as they delved deeper into what brought her here today. The cluttered desk, globe spinning silently in its corner, books lining shelves, all faded from relevance compared to the moment playing out between professor and royalty. As Alan prepared himself for whatever came next, there was no denying that everything had changed with just this one visit, and how could it not have when he looked into those eyes reflecting back his own words like a mirror. Kira sat down. "I have questions," she said firmly but kindly now, reaching out to pull up a chair near where Alan stood. And so did he, more than ever before, as the initial shock began to give way to anticipation of what new insights might emerge from their conversation. And the dim glow of early evening cast long shadows across the crowded room as Professor Alan Moore adjusted his glasses and prepared to address a gathering faculty dinner. The air was thick with anticipation and tension, given that today's event marked the arrival of Trekkie diplomats, specifically Kurevit's immediate family, who were less than pleased about their youngest princess's unorthodox sojourn into human academia. "I read your colleague Professor Moore's paper. Elenvath, eldest sister to Princess Kurevith and heir apparent to the Trekkie throne," announced with a sneer that cut through the room like a knife. Her emerald scales shimmered under soft ambient lighting as she stood confidently at one end of the long banquet table set in an ornate hall adorned with tapestries depicting historical Trekkie milestones. "Your sister built more in 5 years than your entire line has managed to achieve over 50, Elenvath continued, her voice dripping sarcasm. "And yet he considers our most overlooked princess special. How desperate must a human be if they think plainness is beauty?" Laughter rippled through the audience. Faculty members of varying species exchanged amused glances before casting sympathetic looks towards Professor Moore, who sat across from Elenvath, visibly bracing for impact. Professor Alan Moore stood up slowly but resolutely among his colleagues. The room fell silent as he cleared his throat and began to speak without raising his voice, a deliberate gesture emphasizing the gravity of what was about to be said rather than trying to drown out mocking laughter with volume. Princess Kuravith, he started firmly, addressing no one in particular, but everyone present at once, has undertaken numerous economic reforms that have seen unprecedented growth and stability within our partnership sectors. She has spearheaded infrastructure improvements across vast territories, ensuring sustainable development for future generations. Alan paused briefly to take breaths between sentences, as though each word was carefully weighed before being released into the air like precious jewels laid out one by one on velvet. Her quiet brilliance is matched only by her humility, he added with a slight smile playing at his lips. Is not merely decorative, she transforms lives and societies through sheer intellectual prowess. Silence enveloped everyone in attendance as Alan recited Kuravith's accomplishments from memory, each point punctuated firmly yet respectfully. And when it comes to aesthetics, Alan continued, eyes flashing with conviction despite the tense atmosphere around him, beauty is far more than scales or stature. It's about seeking value where others see none. Elenveth scoffed loudly, but was cut off before she could reply, as Alan pressed on uninterrupted. Your sister has done what many thought impossible, bridged gaps between worlds and cultures that had been fractured for centuries, fostering mutual respect rather than division. His voice grew stronger with each passing moment of recollection. 'Tis the embodiment of transformative leadership. The hall filled momentarily with murmurs, as if processing not just Alan's words, but also their significance. But let us be clear, he concluded softly yet distinctly now that his point was made, turning back towards Elenvath, whose eyes had narrowed in irritation. I documented facts, not flattery. These aren't hollow praises, they're based on genuine observations and interactions. Silence hung heavy once more as Alan sat down amidst stunned silence from both humans and aliens alike. Elenvath glared daggers at Professor Moore before standing up abruptly, herself her emerald scales catching light eerily in the dimly lit room. Without another word or look back, she stormed out of the hall with an indignant huff, followed closely by her attendants. The door slammed shut behind them, echoing loudly through the now quiet space, filled only with residual tension and awe at what had transpired so unexpectedly. Princess Kuravith sat in stunned silence across from Alan, who was still processing his own words aloud. The room felt smaller, somehow a mirror reflecting Ba. CK both shared understanding between professor and royalty, as well as an unspoken promise of future conversations far more profound than initial greetings or academic papers ever could have anticipated. Kira's eyes met Alan's with something new shining brightly, with ingratitude, perhaps, respect certainly, but also a glint of hope that she too had longed for yet never dared to expect would come from outside her world. Princess Kuravith gazed into the vast expanse of stars from the campus observatory's telescope, her emerald scales catching faint moonlight as she leaned against a nearby wall. The cool night air sent shivers down her spine, but it was more than physical cold that made her body tense. It was the weight of countless expectations and unspoken judgments. She had always felt like an afterthought among the opulent princesses who flaunted their jewels and grandeur. Tonight, however, she couldn't shake off a sense of longing to be seen for more than just her royal status. As if sensing her presence from afar, footsteps approached with measured caution. Alan Moore stepped into the observatory's dimly lit room, his glasses reflecting a few stars as he adjusted them on his face. He glanced at Kurivith, who had not noticed him yet. She was too lost in thought and starlight. "Princess," Alan began softly, breaking through her reverie, but leaving her undisturbed enough that it seemed like the night breeze itself whispered to her. Kurivith turned slowly towards Alan, a mix of surprise and relief washing over her features. "Professor Moore." He walked closer until they were standing side by side at the telescope's eyepiece, gazing out into the cosmos together. The observatory was an old circular building with high domed ceilings, adorned with metal supports holding heavy glass panels that could retract to allow clear skies above. Inside, it felt both cozy and expansive due to rows of telescopes, maps hanging from walls, and a faint aroma of aged wood mixed with fresh coffee brewed in the corner. "Why are you here at this hour?" Alan asked, his voice tinged with curiosity, but also concern for her well-being. Kurivith sighed softly before responding. "I came here to think away from everything else." She paused, looking down and then back up towards him. "No one has ever really defended me," she admitted quietly, the admission heavy on her tongue like unspoken truths longed for yet rarely uttered aloud. "They call me Spare Princess, but I wonder if it's true for myself or because of how others see me." Alan's eyes softened with understanding, though he kept his expression neutral so as not to overstep boundaries they had set between them. Thus far, professional and respectful distance maintained out of mutual respect. "What do you think?" Alan asked gently. "Are you the Spare Princess in your own mind?" Kurivith shook her head slightly, looking up at him with renewed determination. "I don't know anymore," she admitted honestly. "No one has ever asked me what I want. Not as a person, just Kira." Alan nodded thoughtfully, tilting his chin towards the stars above them. "Then figure it out," he encouraged softly. "You're brilliant enough to be anything you set your mind to." His words were simple, but carried weight and sincerity. The princess' eyes lit up momentarily with hope, though uncertainty lingered in her gaze. She looked back at Alan questioningly. "What would you help me?" she asked hesitantly. Alan regarded her intently for a moment before answering warmly. "Of course I will," he assured her without hesitation, "but not as another subject of study." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Perhaps we can start by understanding each other better, not just in terms of your culture or my fieldwork, but genuinely. To start," Kurivith interrupted softly, with a hint of vulnerability and hope. "Right," Alan confirmed gently, smiling slightly as he felt the warmth of connection form between them despite their vastly different backgrounds. "As friends." Kurivith's eyes widened ever so briefly before she nodded slowly in agreement, her heart swelling unexpectedly within her chest. It was more than an academic relationship. It promised something new and uncharted for both of them. They stood there quietly observing the stars together under twinkling constellations beyond glass panels that opened to reveal a universe vast yet invitingly close to night. The sound of crickets outside merged harmoniously with distant rustles from nocturnal creatures exploring their campus surroundings, creating an almost musical backdrop against which two hearts began beating in unison for what lay ahead. With the telescope's eye turned outward towards infinity and inward reflection forming connections deeper than any academic paper ever could have intended, Alan and Kurivith watched stars together in comfortable silence. Each star a whisper of possibilities yet unseen. Kurivith's eyes fluttered open to the gentle glow of morning light filtering through her bedroom window, casting soft patterns across emerald scales and the intricate carvings lining her chamber walls. The air was cool yet comfortable, a stark contrast to Earth's humid nights spent beside Alan. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of anticipation settle over her as she prepared for today's return home, a day filled with political pressure and unforeseen challenges. "Princess Karev," came a crisp voice from outside her door moments later. "Your father requests your presence in the council chamber immediately." Karev nodded silently to herself, standing up gracefully and moving towards the mirror where she inspected her reflection critically. The simple dress she wore was modest compared to those of her sisters, who adorned themselves with jewels and elaborate patterns meant to impress and intimidate rather than communicate genuine self-expression. "Thank you," Karev replied politely as the messenger departed. With a steady hand, she adjusted a strand of her long black hair that had fallen over one eye, a nervous habit from years of feeling overshadowed by more flamboyant princesses within their royal family hierarchy. She walked through familiar hallways lined with vibrant tapestries, depicting tales of ancient Threki history and glory. The floors beneath her feet were cold stone, but the air smelled richly perfumed due to carefully placed scent dispensers along the walls, aromas meant to evoke tranquility, yet serve as a constant reminder of one's status among peers. Upon entering the council chamber, Karev found herself amidst a collection of elder advisors and royalty from other branches of her family. Her father sat at the head of an elaborately carved wooden table, his gaze stern, but also curious towards her arrival. Before addressing everyone present formally yet directly, "Princess Karev," he began firmly, "your absence has been noticed by many in our government who have concerns regarding your ability to handle diplomatic responsibilities." Karev felt a familiar pressure mounting inside her chest as she faced these older figures who had always looked down upon her capabilities, lack thereof, according to them. His time was different. Something within her had shifted due to Alan's influence. "Father," Karev started, meeting his gaze with an unexpected confidence born from recent revelations about herself. "I am prepared and willing to take on these responsibilities more than ever before." Her voice carried a steadiness she rarely heard in earlier meetings filled with doubt or silence. When challenged publicly by peers or elders like those assembled now, eyes widened around the table as Karev continued, "During my absence, I've learned much beyond what is traditionally taught here," her tone turning almost playful despite addressing serious matters. "I believe it's time we embrace fresh perspectives that recognize individual worth rather than rigid expectations." Her father blinked in surprise before a slow smile began to spread across his face, something genuine and approving flickering there instead of the usual wariness or disappointment seen when faced with Karev's unconventional ideas. "Tell us more," he encouraged warmly, leaning forward slightly on elbows resting upon table surface. Karev took several deep breaths, organizing her thoughts carefully before speaking further. "Recently, I met someone who made me reconsider my place and value within our society." Her eyes drifted momentarily towards a corner of the room, where an ornamental plant grew, memories of Alan's kind words replaying vividly in mind as she spoke next aloud. "I learned to see myself differently," Karev confessed openly, feeling both vulnerable yet empowered, sharing personal insights amidst this formal setting. "To understand that true power lies not just in titles or possessions, but also recognizing the unique contributions each individual can bring." The room fell silent again after her statement, in dead air thick with unspoken thoughts and questions swirling among attendees as they processed Karev's bold declarations for change. "Who is this person?" one elder asked eventually, voice holding an undercurrent of curiosity despite initial disapproval shown towards any suggestion deviating from traditional norms. Currie hesitated briefly before answering honestly. A human named Professor Alan Moore, she replied softly yet firmly. He studies our culture objectively, but also sees beyond societal expectations, much like I hope others will soon learn to do. Gasps and murmurs rippled through assembly as news of interaction with a human spread among those present. Reactions varied from shock to intrigue given Trekkie history, where interactions outside planet borders were rare due to isolationist policies. Father's eyes softened further hearing mention of Alan, perhaps sensing the sincerity behind Currie's words reflecting personal growth rather than just rebellious defiance against established rules. Very well, he conceded gracefully. After a moment of contemplation, we will hear your proposals moving forward, but remember always that responsibility and duty come first above all. Currie nodded respectfully, acknowledging his wisdom, even if certain aspects remained unchanged momentarily within broader cultural dynamics. Nevertheless, seeds planted today would likely bear fruit someday, as new voices emerge championing diversity in thinking over rigid adherence to customs limiting individual potential. Feeling exhilarated despite lingering doubts from others present regarding unconventional alliances formed off-world, Currie left council chamber with renewed purpose burning brightly inside, heart ready not only face challenges ahead, but also pave path, showing others true value within unique perspectives cultivated across borders and barriers separating worlds apart. Later that evening, back home in quiet solitude of own chambers again, Princess Currie finally allowed herself to relax fully. The day's events had been draining yet exhilarating simultaneously. She missed Earth, already missing familiar sights, sounds, textures surrounding her during times spent with lanceable things such as morning breeze carrying scent of freshly brewed coffee, or sight stars shining brightly overhead reminding vast universe held countless mysteries waiting discovery beyond current horizons. Reaching for personal calm device placed beside pillow, Currie entered code connecting them directly, bypassing usual formalities often enforced between humans and Trekkie royalty. Within seconds, face appeared on screen. Alan's bright blue eyes, crinkling at corners from grin spreading across features, greeted her warmly upon seeing who initiated contact. Currie, he began softly once connection established fully. What brings you here? She smiled genuinely before responding verbally rather than typing out message meticulously, as previously done for formal communications. I wanted to tell you thank you for everything. Alan's expression softened further, hearing sincere gratitude in Currie's voice despite usual formality separating them professionally. During earlier interactions, focused solely academic exchange. Of course, he replied gently. Is there anything specific we can discuss now or just catch up? Currie hesitated slightly before answering truthfully. I wanted to continue learning from you. A pause followed as she considered phrasing carefully yet directly, conveying deeper meaning beyond surface-level conversation initiated moments ago. About being seen for who I truly am rather than societal expectations placed around me. Alan nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging importance behind Currie's desire for genuine connection versus superficial interactions typically enforced between academic subjects and researchers studying them. Certainly, he responded warmly. What would you like to know? She blinked slowly, then, feeling more open, expressing vulnerability now, knowing Alan understood value in cultivating such connections rather than strictly adhering formalities separating individuals across cultural divides. About what? About yourself, Currive answered softly yet confidently. How do I keep growing as person? You help me see potential within. How can we continue exploring mutual understanding beyond mere academic interest? Between friends who genuinely care about each other's growth and well-being regardless of worlds or backgrounds separating us. Alan's eyes lit up with understanding, nodding slowly, in agreement. I'm here for that, he promised sincerely. Together, before signing off, Currive gave Alan one final request. Please, give me your personal calm code, she asked hesitantly but firmly. Why? Alan questioned, genuinely surprised yet intrigued by an unusual request coming from high-ranking Trekkie princess accustomed strictly formal channels communicating with outsiders. I want to continue learning, she explained softly. From you. Alan paused briefly, considering implications before nodding slowly. All right, he complied reluctantly yet understanding necessity behind breaking barriers, maintaining distance between them previously for professional reasons only. Thank you, Currive whispered gratefully, feeling connection deepen further beyond surface levels established earlier today through academic exchange alone. As night descended once more over Trekkie Palace grounds, stars twinkling brightly above, Currive felt lighter within heart despite challenges lying ahead. She missed Earth, already missing chance spending another evening beside Alan, learning from each other under clear skies free of societal expectations dictating every move made or word spoken between them. With final goodbyes exchanged through device linking two hearts across borders vast universe held, Currive lay down peacefully, in own chamber, streams filled visions dancing around stars, beyond glass panels opening revealing infinite possibilities, yet unseen awaiting exploration together. Chapter 6. She returns. The lecture hall was empty as Professor Alan Moore prepared to leave for the evening. The room had a sterile smell of chalk dust and faint traces of worn carpet under his shoes. Rows upon rows of desks stretched out like an army at attention. Books lay scattered, untouched by any student's eager hands tonight. Alan glanced up from packing away notes when he heard the door creak open softly behind him. His heart skipped a beat as he turned around to see Princess Currive standing there, her emerald scales glinting in the dim light of the hall's overhead lamps. She looked different, her posture more confident and relaxed, her eyes gleaming with an unspoken resolve. Princess? Alan asked quietly, unsure how to proceed, but feeling a warmth spread through him at seeing her again after so long. Currive stepped into the room without hesitation, closing the door behind her. Professor Moore, she greeted formally yet with unexpected ease that surprised even herself. Alan's gaze moved over her figure as he felt a wave of pride wash over him. His words had reached beyond mere academic discourse to touch something deeper within Currive. It's been months since we last spoke, Alan noted, noticing the subtle change in her demeanor and how she seemed more at ease now than ever before. Yes, she agreed, taking another step closer towards where he stood near the entrance of his lecture hall. I have returned. Returned? Alan repeated with curiosity evident on his face as he paused from collecting papers to look directly into Currive's eyes, which shone brightly despite the dim lighting conditions inside the room. She nodded slowly and her voice softened, almost reverentially. I requested a permanent diplomatic posting here on Earth. Her tone held an undercurrent of determination that caught Alan off guard yet filled him with hope he hadn't known was there until now. And what will you actually be doing? He asked carefully, sensing the gravity in Currive's decision and wanting to understand fully before delving further into uncharted territory. She stepped closer still so they were only a few feet apart. Learning, she stated simply yet powerfully, enough for Alan to feel the weight of her words settle between them like an unwritten promise carried on invisible threads connecting their spirits across vast distances, both physical and emotional. Growing, her voice softened again, adding another layer of meaning beneath its surface that he could almost taste in the air around them. Being with someone who sees me, she concluded softly but firmly, her eyes never leaving Alan's, as she made this revelation clear to him. She sought connection beyond mere cultural exchange or diplomatic duty. She wanted something deeper than titles and treaties allowed. She craved understanding on a level that transcended worlds and species entirely. Alan was taken aback by the sincerity in Curry's voice, his hands pausing mid-air as he held one of her papers lightly between fingers while trying to process what she had just shared. The room seemed smaller somehow, filled with an electric tension that crackled through the air between them despite its otherwise mundane setting. "Kira," he began hesitantly, but then stopped himself, realizing this moment required more than formal titles or diplomatic niceties. It demanded honesty and openness beyond anything they'd ever exchanged before. She gave him a small smile, one that reached her eyes, unlike any expression Alan had seen from Curry previously, a softness there he recognized now as genuine affection rather than duty-bound respect. "You wrote," she started, carefully choosing each word, thoughtfully yet confidently conveying the impact of his earlier words, which seemed to have touched something profound within her soul, "that I was beautiful in ways my people fail to see." Alan felt a shiver run down his spine at those exact words coming from Curry's mouth here and now. It had been months since he'd written them, but their truth hadn't faded with time. If anything, it resonated stronger each passing day, until today, when she finally spoke them back as her own. "And do you still believe that?" Her voice was barely a whisper, yet carried so much unspoken weight Alan could almost see her internal struggle reflected in the intensity of her gaze, fixed unwaveringly on his face, seeking answers only he could provide truthfully, without hesitation or regret. He closed the small distance between them, reaching out gently to touch Curry's cheek with one hand, a gesture both tender and reverent, as if recognizing sacred ground touched by rare privilege. "More than ever," Alan replied earnestly, meeting her gaze directly before drawing back slightly, but still holding on to hope that lingered palpably in the quiet space between them. Curry blinked slowly, then nodded once more, feeling connection deepen further beyond surface levels, established earlier through academic exchange alone, now truly felt solidified here and now under stark lights of this unfamiliar yet strangely comforting setting. She met Alan's eyes with renewed purpose, knowing she'd found someone who saw her as much or even more than she did herself. The overlooked princess had finally been seen, and realized there was no going back to being invisible once you knew such light existed in the universe. Alan watched Curry for another moment, seeing not just a Trekkie royalty standing before him, but also an individual soul seeking acceptance and understanding beyond societal expectations or species differences entirely. Together they stood silently, acknowledging profound change that had occurred without explicit declaration, leaving open-ended possibilities stretching out like stars twinkling brightly against night sky outside window panel behind them, hinting at endless journey ahead filled with mutual exploration, learning from one another on path neither could have predicted alone, but together seemed possible and necessary now more than ever before. The chapter ended exactly where it began, Professor Alan Moore standing in his lecture hall, looking directly into Curry's eyes as they both recognized shift within themselves, allowing new horizons to open up despite vast distances separating their worlds traditionally.